Well, hello, everybody. Good evening. I am Sonia Clark, Artpark President. Thank you for joining us this evening again for our series of conversations and especially the one tonight. Through this series, Artpark Idea, we're exploring what is the Artpark Idea, and through our conversations, we're exploring what Artpark could be through the view of our visionary artists hosted in our conversations and also through yours, our audience. At the bottom of the screen, we have a Q&A box where we hope you can post your comments and questions, which will be seen by all of us, the hosts, and which we'll address during the conversation or toward the end of it. If you'd like to talk, you can raise your virtual hand. There will be an opportunity at the end for that as well. We would like to encourage you to consider a donation or pledge toward Art Park Laboratory, a program that is driven by Artist Residency program. And hopefully through our conversation, you'll see why it is so crucial for Art Park to have a vibrant, ongoing residency program. With a minimum donation of $150, you can get a poster by Philip Burke, who is going to be our artist next week. The posters are donated to us by Philip and his management. And also for $250 limited donation, you can be a proud owner of one of the 31 original signed posters of the Omega by Owen Morell, an artist who we had last week with us. So tonight, our conversation is hosted, as always, by Dr. Anthony Bannon, and we're welcoming Evan Lewis. Ewan was an art park artist in 1987, 1989, and 91, so he's a triple art park artist. Uh, Ewan Lewis has been an active artist sculptor since 1978. His interest in kinetic wind-powered art has led him to work primarily in metal. Equally important to his work is the incorporation of sound, which is produced through delicate wind-powered percussive components. In 1988, Ewan Lewis was commissioned to create his first large-scale wind sound sculpture for Expo 88 in Brisbane, Australia. Australia, correct. Numerous commissions have followed, including site-specific works for universities, municipal institutions, private collections. In 1995, several of Ewan Lewis's sculptures were commissioned by Warner Brothers Entertainment for the major motion picture Twister, who I think we all recognize and remember very well. And more importantly, Ewan was one of Art Park's most um, celebrated artists, starting here as a maybe a younger or mid-career artist, which would love to discuss his residencies at Art Park were outside of his normal realm, from what I understand from our conversations, which is so important for the residencies at Art Park that they bring that aspect to an artist to explore other areas of their work and maybe try things for the very first time. And with that, welcome, Evan. We're so incredibly honored to have you, and we can't wait for this. I think what is promising to be a fantastic, fascinating conversation. Tony, lead the way.
Well, I'm thrilled, I must tell you. I was excited to see the sculpture when it was presented, and my field of consideration for works that incorporate many sources, and one might say even disciplines, was a real thrill to consider your work, to listen to them, and I wanted to ask you questions way back then, so I'm particularly pleased that you're with us tonight. Uh, what led you to create sound from a sculpture? What's the first sui generis?
Well, thank you for that kind introduction. I started out, doing kinetic sculpture, things that moved, and particularly in the wind, as opposed to something that's motorized, because I really liked the aspect of randomness. And I must say that of all the different artists whose work I looked at, I think that George Rickey was amazingly gifted at creating things that moved in a very random fashion and would be surprising and interesting. And so I really wanted to try to do that myself. And then that just sort of naturally led to what if when the thing moves, it makes a sound, and a distinct sound like a bell tone, and then the silence, and then again the sound, and that really sort of kind of points out that whole randomness, because then there is an on-off that's happening, and it's completely out of your control. And so that's what really interested me, and still does, and I'm still working on
it. Was your residency at Artpark near the beginning of your creation of sculpture that would sound?
Yes, it was. I probably had already kind of begun to experiment with sound work, but my first residency at Artpark in particular, was very fruitful that way, because all of a sudden I had 4 weeks where I could just work and do my thing and not have to do anything else. And so that really enabled me to explore and create, and I created actually 2 sound pieces in that period, in that first residency.
Now, one might think of an artist in residency as an opportunity for the artist to share work with a new public, and to allow that public to participate or observe the genesis of the piece that you have bargained to develop at the park. But um, what I'm hearing is that you learned something, given the challenge of creating the work that you did, given the location. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And
And having the public observe was definitely a factor that had a great effect. And some of the people were kind of naysayers, and so that could be a little distracting, but that's all right. Everybody has their point of view, and I think it's important to understand that. And then also, there were a lot of people who were very, very encouraging, which was nice, because you don't get that when you're alone in your studio, certainly.
well, that's interesting that you were confronted with naysayers. I, I mean, I don't get it. It's like, but it's difficult to understand how Hans Arp was dismissed because he used aluminum, or that clay was
Sure.
rejected from the palaces of art. Whatever could be the argument about your work that was unacceptable to this audience?
Well, I don't know. They, um, people who maybe aren't well versed, exposed to art, modern art, sculpture, just don't really have any experience of it, and so that, you know, they wonder what the heck you're doing.
Mm.
And that's, you know, that's pretty common. I think that's a pretty common response.
Mm.
And I also think that that really, pardon me, that I think that at least at the time, I think that was one of the great things about Artpark, was that the whole point was to get people to come out and look at all these people, all these artists making things, doing their thing, and expose them to all these new ideas. And so that's just sort of part of the process, I think.
Now you came with some slides.
I did.
Good.
You want to see them?
Well, let's look at some. Yes.
Okay. Well, that's up to you guys. There's my name.
Nicely done.
Yeah, isn't that nice?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had nothing to do with that. Okay, so here I am in the Forge studio, the open air Forge studio, which was just the perfect place to build kinetic sculpture. And we'll go to the, now there, you can sort of see the image on the right. Up near the top, you see some sort of green fiberglass, and that's a spinning sculpture that I built in the first day and a half that I was there. And that's not a sound piece, and that's still out in the world somewhere. Now we'll go to the next slide, and you'll see the first sound. Okay, so this was a piece that I made in the first kind of week and a half of my first residency, and it's called Beauty Can. And so this was sort of one of the first sound pieces that I did ever. And it basically, what happens is that those two vertical fins rock back and forth, and in the process of doing that, they activate lift and release mallets that strike like xylophone keys that are on the side of that sort of horn element. And there are 5 different notes, and the mallets are just wooden. And so that was the first thing I made there. And interestingly, at the far end of that piece, there is a sort of cylindrical form that's sideways, and that was a bucket that a galvanized bucket that I bought at a hardware store in Niagara, right before I started the residency. I went shopping and I bought this bucket, and I incorporated it into the piece. And the bucket had a label on the bottom. And I mean, this was a bucket that was probably sitting in that hardware store for 40 years before I bought it. And the label said Beauty Can, hence the title of the piece.
Mm-hmm. You did 2 pieces that first year.
I did. I actually did more than 2, but I did 2 significant ones.
Mm-hmm.
So the next slide is, let's go to the next one. Yeah, okay. So this is the other piece, other sort of major piece that I did in that 4-week period. And this piece is called She Loves Me Not. And there's a good story behind that. And so this has 4 tones that are just pieces of tubing that are vertical, hanging. So it's basically tubular bells, but they're just tubes that I found and hung, and it functions in the same fashion. In this case, it's a horizontal kind of wing that pivots in the center, and it works like a sort of like a seesaw. And when it moves, again, it activates, lifts, and releases mallets that strike those tubes. And so you have 4 different tones that play. And so again, it's very much all about the randomness of the wind and how it's going to hit the piece and when is it going to move this way or that way and how fast, and hence the sort of song that it makes.
The at this point, still experimenting.
Yeah.
Are have you discovered a core idea that will, going forward, animate the work, or are you still working through that notion to discover a principle that works behind this art?
Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that. At the moment, there are maybe 8 or 10 major pieces that I would like to build. And they're pretty all different. And so, it's a matter of just getting to it. One thing that I would like to point out is that this sculpture that we're looking at now, and the first one we looked at, stylistically, they're so different from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of a theme of mine. I really like to kind of leap around that way. And certainly in my furniture work, I get a lot of opportunity to jump around in terms of, a kind of a visual reference to different periods, different ideas. But in terms of the, making the sounds and the randomness idea, that's sort of like the seed that that I'm cultivating all the time.
Mm-hmm. Can we see another example?
You sure can. The next slide is, oh, you know what? I just want to go back to this, to the former slide, because I want to mention the title again. That piece was called Is You Is. No, that piece was called She Loves Me Not. And that title was, I ended up having a contest to make a name for the sculpture. I had the sculpture done and it was set up nearby the studio, and people would come, and a lot of times people would come and talk to me and I couldn't get my work done, and it was frustrating. And so I decided to have a competition to name the sculpture, and I made a poster and I had a candelabra that was sitting there, and I said on the poster, think of a name for that sculpture and you could win this candelabra. And so people would come, and then I had a little box with a slot and I had little forms you could fill out. And so people would come and they would read the poster, and then they would turn around and look at the sculpture, and then they would take the piece of paper and they would write an entry and put it in. And so that was interesting because I got a lot of feedback. Some of the names were pretty sarcastic,
Mm.
and although the name that I chose was just brilliant, and it was a great exercise, certainly for me. But we'll go on to the next one. So this piece I made in my second time at Artpark, and the title of it is You Is, and actually the full title is You Is, and then in parentheses, or Is You Ain't. And this sculpture plays a handsaw. Good luck building a kinetic sculpture that plays a handsaw.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was a struggle, and I probably spent 2 weeks doing it, but I got there. And it's kind of hard to make out, but in the image, if you sort of off to the right, there's a sort of a rusty triangle, and that is the handsaw, and hovering above it is a mallet. And so the piece moves and the mallet strikes the saw, and then the saw also moves, and so it goes woo woo when the thing hits it.
Nicely done. The
Well, thank you.
both the sculpture and the vocalization. Do you play an instrument?
I play at the moment. I play tenor sax.
Who's the best tenor sax player ever?
Well, I don't think it's fair, but John Coltrane.
Of course.
I mean, come on, you
Yeah.
know? Oh my
Good.
God, what a genius.
Okay. Well,
But there's a lot of good tenor players out there, right?
but with Coltrane now in hand, we can go forward.
Okay.
What's the next? Oh, this is Artpark also.
No, actually,
Hmm.
this is not from Artpark, but this is a piece that I built in that period, and it was very experimental. And this is a piece that has a string, a big long string that goes from the kind of the center of that roof up to the top, and then there are those turbines that off to the left side there, and they rotate and they drive a disc that rubs on that string and plays it like a hurdy-gurdy.
Ah.
And are you familiar with a hurdy-gurdy?
Sure.
It's a string instrument that has these discs that revolve and excite the strings. This is just a one-note hurdy-gurdy. Although I also put there's a vane at the top of this piece that rocks up and down in the wind, and I created a kind of a plunger on that, which changes the tension on the string and changes the pitch. And again, this is a labor of love. There's so much trial and error involved in creating something like this. There's just like endless tinkering, and you'll get it to work and it's so exciting, and then it stops working and you spend days trying to get it back again. Where's
the piece now?
It no longer is extant, I'm sorry to say. It was left behind in a studio that was eventually torn down. So it's gone. Although I think I'm going to build it again. I plan on building it again because it won some awards. It was in some shows and it won 2 different cash prizes, which was pretty cool. It's always encouraging. Get a little money.
Yes. Well, Joyce Jasurda comments that must be addressing you, that you're the hurdy-gurdy man.
Yeah.
Would you care to answer that?
No.
Moving along then.
Okay. I know her.
Yeah. That accounts for the question. Huh?
Yeah. I think it's a comment though.
Okay.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's no question mark.
So here we are. We're kind of going on to something else here, but I wanted to. I thought it would be interesting to see some other pieces that I've done. This represents a fairly large public commission, a piece that I was commissioned to make for Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville, Illinois. And this sculpture is all about the sun and shadows. And so the challenge here was that the site is on the 90th meridian. And in fact, just a little ways south of this sculpture is a dome by geodesic dome by Buckminster Fuller that has a stained glass ceiling that is like a map of the earth, as if you were looking up through it. And this was his kind of statement about the 90th meridian as well. And in this map, you see the 90th meridian. But so they wanted me to make a sculpture that spoke to being on the 90th meridian. And what does that mean? Well, I don't know. I mean, really all that means is that it's 90 degrees from Greenwich, which is pretty arbitrary, but that's the deal. And so what I did was I made a piece that makes a shadow every day at solar noon. We go to the next slide. I think we'll see that. Aha. So what happens is at solar noon, which is the middle of the day, when the sun is directly overhead, it shines down, and so those sort of stripes on the pavement represent the 90th meridian. And then you see the disc, that round shape, that round shadow. And basically what happens is that this is a piece that tells the time of year. And so this particular day was an equinox day. And so the shadow is kind of in the middle of the pavilion. And then in summer solstice, that round disc shadow is all the way at the bottom of the image here, right where the S is. And then on the winter solstice, that shadow is all the way at the other end of the pavilion. And so it just shows you the sun moving in its path through the seasons. Now, so this to me is important, interesting geometrically. This is something that's always intrigued me, curvilinear geometry. And I think in my next slide, you get a view of that. We'll look at that. There you go, looking up, and then there's a weather vane at the top that gives you wind direction and speed. And so, this was a response to creating something at a university with a theme.
Where is there a readout of the speed of the wind?
No, no, you just have to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a rotor at the front of that thing that spins, and so you just have to watch the rotor and see how fast it's going. It's pretty simple. I do have a little Neanderthal in me,
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Let's are we coming back to Artpark?
No, I think we're not, although I'm happy to talk about Artpark.
Yeah, go ahead.
So then, I thought it would be interesting to see, for people to see this. This is the biggest, most ambitious work that I've done. And this is a sculpture in Memphis, Tennessee, that is in a newish park, a new park that was developed on the riverfront right at the end of Beale Street. And I was commissioned to build this piece as kind of a gateway that leads you from the city into the park. And the title of this is Meander. And it has two different fairly large towers, each of which has a pretty big kinetic sculpture on it. And so these two towers have these pieces on them that turn in the wind. And it is a pretty interesting dynamic thing to watch, because you have these two distinctly separate things that are moving in the wind, almost like they're dancing with each other, like choreography. And it also has a catfish in the middle, because if you're building a sculpture on the banks of the Mississippi, you got to have a catfish. And I didn't give you guys video, but there is video available on my sculpture website that people could go and look at if they want to see video of this piece.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a
Now,
few more images. Go ahead, Tony.
do we still hear the experience at Artpark in the work that we're seeing now? Does the values that you developed at Artpark, aesthetic values, do they persist into this work?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And would you tell us about it?
Well, you know, it's hard to sort of describe that exactly, but it's a continuum. You know, having an idea, then exploring it, and bringing it into being. You know, that whole process. It's certainly thematic thing for me, and you know, Artpark was a big sort of starting point for that process.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, this of course is on a really large scale. So you know, there's a lot of stuff that has to be managed. And you know, mostly I did this on my own. I mean, I had help in my studio, but I don't hire a fabricator. I build all this stuff myself. And these, you know, I think that maybe one of the things about Artpark, for me anyway, was that studio was pretty Spartan. You know, if it rained really hard, you'd get wet. And you just got to make it work with what you have. And this piece is a good example because you know, these towers are like 26 feet without the columns. And I fabricated this in a studio with an 11-foot ceiling. So you just got to make it happen with what you have. And Artpark, although, I mean, it was a fantastic opportunity, but you also had to really kind of scrounge around and figure stuff out. And
what year?
I think that's. Go ahead.
What year was this?
This was 2014.
And what's the experience been with the piece at the site?
You know, I don't know too much about that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get down to Memphis much. In fact, I haven't been there since. But I presume that it's people enjoy it. Certainly, while I was putting it up, people were pretty excited about it.
Mm-hmm. And where do we go from here?
Well, you tell me. There's a few more images of this. There's the catfish.
Well, we can click through them.
Now, I'm not sure what's next. I forget. So we'll see. Oh, so now here we are. This is kind of more current. So this is a piece of sculpture that I have here. This is at my studio here in Wisconsin. So this is right outside of my workshop. And this is a big vertical piece with two elements that move. And sort of below in the middle there are two big bells, really big bells, that are struck by pretty large mallets when those pieces move. And then, so now we'll get back to Artpark, Tony, because look there in the distance is that sculpture Beauty Can that we saw with the first one. Let's go back, because now we're getting into furniture. So there's Beauty Can. That was in Twister. You know, I built it at Artpark.
Yep.
It appeared in Twister. And if you pay close attention, you'll see it in Twister in a few different scenes. And and then coincidentally, just this winter, somebody contacted me who was kind of a twister fanatic, a twister lover, and asked about if there was any sculpture left from the film. And I mentioned Beauty Can, and he bought it. So Beauty Can has found a home, and ironically or not, that home is in just north of Toronto, which is right across the lake from Artpark.
Mm-hmm.
So how about that for, you know, going around the world?
Now the cans, the uh, the vessels that are sounded when the mallet strikes.
Yes,
Um, did you fabricate those?
yes,
Hmm.
yes. I make those as well.
Do you have one
And
near? Do you have one
as a
nearby?
matter of fact, Tony, I have a
Yes.
couple of them right here with me.
Oh, wonderful.
Would you like to
Let's.
hear one?
I would.
All right, I'm gonna hit one. You ready?
Yeah. And the other?
And the other. Now, the second one is kind of an odd shape, and it's a little bit like a cowbell, and it kind of sounds like a cowbell, which
Mm-hmm.
is, I guess, how cowbells work.
Uh-huh.
A lot of trial and error, you know,
Hmm.
which, you know, Artpark was all about that for me.
We have a question wondering if there's any video of these projects.
Well, again, if you go to my website,
Mm-hmm.
you can watch a video of that sculpture in Memphis called Meander.
Mm-hmm.
I also have a YouTube channel, and there are some videos there.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have. I have to say that I'm kind of remiss that I don't have video that I would like.
Mm-hmm.
I just haven't really put time into that because I'm too busy building the stuff, basically,
Mm-hmm.
and also making furniture, which is mostly how I make my living.
Okay. Making art or one, of course, furniture should be considered art as well.
Mm-hmm.
The uh, th- that practice has engaged you for your life. Is that so?
Yeah, that's right.
Uh, and how does one become smitten with such complexity as you have evidenced in the course of your life? For there is kinetic sculpture that facilitates sound, and also there is reference through the sculpture to cosmic, if that's not too big a word, um, occasions, the movement of the sun and all that that implies with the shadows that are cast. It's a
Mm-hmm.
complex life that you've lived,
Yeah.
and and the future could as well be even more complex. For I could envision creating a sound environment that would have many elements.
Well,
Um,
Tony, that that's I'm so happy that you mentioned that, because that is precisely where I want to go. And I'll tell you that really at the moment, I feel like I'm still in the woodshed perfecting all sorts of systems for making sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And what I really am hoping to get to is building large pieces that are almost like a temple, like a sound temple. So that it would be something that you can sort of go into And once inside, you would hear all these different sounds that are being produced by things that are moving in the wind.
Mm-hmm.
And those sounds would, of course, be relatively harmonious with each other and would make a kind of, to use your word, cosmic music that is really randomly produced by the weather.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that would be such a phenomenally exciting experience that I just can't wait to get to that.
It's a delightful field. I'm thinking of when the Museum of Modern Art opened after the renovation. One of the most exciting pieces was by John Driscoll, who used found metal, um, large metal objects, and
Mm-hmm.
installed them with electronic apparatus that would read the presence of people as they walked through,
Sure.
emitting
Mm-hmm.
each object emitting a different sound in a
Yeah.
room that's filled with them. The group is called Composers in Electronics,
Mm-hmm.
which is aside from your natural grounding, your grounding in nature,
Sure.
but nonetheless an iteration of the kind of
Yeah,
things that could
absolutely.
happen
Yeah. Yeah.
with sound. There, when you came upon this, what I'm trying to do is to allow those who are with us and myself to get a grip on what must be a highly charged moment of creation when you're there and you discover the door opens for this for using uh, sculpture to read the winds. Can you describe both your intellectual experience when that door opened and if you wouldn't mind your emotional or spiritual connections to such an event, the door opening to this idea?
Um, well, I guess I have to say that it really goes back to um, seeing a sculpture by Calder when I was 14, and it was a big outdoor piece that moved, and I was just absolutely floored and by how cool it was, but I also thought I could do that. I'd
Mm-hmm.
like to try that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And um, and so I did,
Mm-hmm.
although it took a long time to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, I hope I'm talking about what you're asking me to talk about. But initially, just trying to figure out ways to make things that are going to move in the wind. It's very tricky. There's a lot of trial and error, and there's a lot of physics and science and all of that. And so there's a major sort of left brain, right hand thing that has to happen because it's physics. But at the same time, you're trying to create an experience that's going to feed, a sense of wonder, and that's connected to emotion. And so there is the left hand, right brain part of it. And so you have to, get your hemispheres going all the time. And I think that sort of is a theme for me. There's a lot of tinkering and trial and error, and at the same time that when the thing works, when you have that moment where you finally get to bring it outside and stand it up and see what it does, it's that's like the big reward, and a sense of elation and accomplishment. And so then it becomes sort of a process that just continues that way. And also, there are plenty of times when you get the thing, you stand it up, and it doesn't work, or it works for a while, and then it falls over, or it breaks, or whatever. And then you got to start over, you got to fix it, you got to change it. And then especially with the sounds, getting the thing to make the sound the way you want it to make the sound, oh my God, it's a struggle. And half the time I think anybody else would be 3 times better at it than I am, but I got to deal with what I have. So I just keep going.
Well, dealing with what you have casts a long shadow and looks across a broad horizon. Let's try out some furniture.
Sure. I threw in some random slides. Again, if you want to see more of that, of the furniture, I have another website that's just furniture, and there's quite a lot of stuff there. I put this in because I'm really interested in all sorts of things, art historically speaking, different styles, different periods. I'm really interested in craft, which I think you can see from my work. So the whole craft idea is very important to me. This is a console table that was inspired basically by looking at work from Italy. I had done quite a bit of work that was influenced by 18th century French Baroque. And then I kind of started to look at Italian Baroque. And so then my process is to interpret the sort of the feeling of that with modern materials and techniques. And so in this case, the legs of this sculpture are forged angle iron, and those sort of capital elements are also forged. That's forged rebar. And so it's the whole idea of manipulating material sort of to the nth degree to create something really beautiful and interesting. And Tony, I also want to point out that while I was in Artpark, I had my first experience with forging, because I was in the forge. And sure, I was building kinetic sculpture, but also there was a coal forge and a power hammer there. And so naturally I lit it up and started using it, and kind of fell in love with that process. And from that time on, I have been forging steel. And now I have a big, like 200-pound, I have 2 power hammers and a giant forge, and I do a ton of forging, which really came from that experience at Artpark. So how do you like that? Huh?
Well, that's good to know. It's the way it's supposed to work, isn't it?
It is.
Mm-hmm.
And now also here is a reference to also sort of more kind of Roman or Roman or Italian work from way long ago, that the rope, and it was a thing that you would see in a mosaic. You would say there would be a rope around the outside of it as a kind of a border. Though I use a lot of references like that in my furniture work. I forget what else we have, but let's go to another slide. Okay, so now for something completely different.
Wow.
So this is this is pretty current. This is a table that I came up with about a year or so ago, and this piece is displayed in a few different showrooms around the country, and people place orders and we make them. And obviously it's very sculptural, It's almost just barely a table. So how fun is that, you know? But here, you know, I'm really intrigued with creating hollow forms, cutting, you know, all these forms are made by basically forming cylinders and cutting them at angles and then putting them together. And, you know, it's a great and fun process.
Another?
Sure. Do I have any more? I don't know. That might be it.
Common to the work is a relationship between nature and the transformation you put to to the inspiration of natural form. Why bother?
Well, Tony, you know, why not? I mean, what are you going to do? Just sit around all day? I mean, you got to do something, don't you?
Well,
The world is so inspiring.
I think
And
you've
you
in
know, there's
part.
the. I
I'm
was just
sorry.
going to say that there's the natural world that you mentioned. There certainly was a lot of that influence on me when I was growing up. I did a lot of wilderness camping and hiking when I was a preteen and a teenager. And so that had a huge impact on how I think. And then also looking at art from all ages. And so you kind of throw all that into a big stew and stuff comes out.
Well, you've chosen to show yourself to us uh, in front of a window, which reveals shapes not unlike those that we find in your work. Um, so, what is this about nature and you, anyway? Uh,
Well,
well,
I don't know. I mean, you know, the earth is a beautiful place and there's so much to see and be inspired by.
mhm.
And so fundamentally, that's where it all begins. And you know, I think that even, you know, even something like a beautiful cathedral, um, when I look at something like a beautiful cathedral, it makes me think of nature.
Mhm.
It's somebody else's kind of, you know, interpretation or inspiration.
Well, you've explored sound based on wind, and you've given us light, and as evidenced by its shadow, and you have reproduced the the sinewy, the filaments, the more spidery shapes that one finds behind you in the branches, limbs of that tree. What's next? Where will you be going? You, now that you have known light and shadow and wind and the fibrous nature of cellular life, where are you going next anyway?
Well, I think my answer is probably more of the same, and uh, and you know, this sort of sound temple concept that I was blabbering about a little while ago. I'm really keen on creating some sort of structures that can be sort of inhabited and where this experience can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that this, if it's done right, that this can be a really, really profound experience that will give people solace and and even maybe healing.
Mm.
Healing in nature is what I'm shooting for.
Now we
So we'll
we
see.
ha- we have a move. We've experienced moves in that direction. I think of the Rothko Chapel,
Mm-hmm.
for example,
Yep.
and other um, work. But I want to rush to ask you, the environment that you describe, would it be one in which people would live?
Well, that's not really how I see it exactly. More like a thing that you would go
Mm-hmm.
to have an experience,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to be outdoors, open air, and obviously these things will vary, but in some cases they will have roof elements so that potentially you could be protected from rain.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not that well, but fairly well.
Mm-hmm.
But the air is going to pass through this thing, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's an all-weather kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if
It's
you want to go camp in it, that's fine with me.
mm-hmm. Well,
Somebody just wrote here, the sound of a human heartbeat could be healing. I
Uh,
don't.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that.
Somebody, an anonymous attendee, just wrote, the sound of a human heartbeat could be healing.
Yes.
Perhaps it's a suggestion. Um, Perhaps someday we can have you work back at Artpark, which seems to resonate so much with what we're thinking. Among other areas, we've developed this one area we call Sound Garden or
Yeah.
Percussion Garden. So one day, perhaps we should be able to add one of your incredible um, creations that bring all of those elements: nature, sound, sculpture, natural elements, and also the medium you're working with, the metal, the
Hmm.
steel.
Yeah.
Evan, thank you for your provocative conversation. Is there anything that you came prepared to say that we haven't elicited?
Well, yeah, maybe briefly, I'll just say that the the opportunity to work in that studio in at Artpark was a game changer, for a life changer for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I am keenly grateful to have had that opportunity. And I think it's so important to provide that sort of thing for for people, particularly for young artists, being able to do your work and um, for an extended period of time and make some wages and have a place to stay. And that's really a golden thing, and I'm very grateful that I got to do it. So I thank Artpark from the bottom of my heart for that.
Well, we want to thank you for being with us tonight and for vouching um, for the experience you had at Artpark, and we look forward to seeing if we can't tame those in the audience that would speak against your work. We'll have to, if not tame them, at least train them, huh? And that, of course, will be the work of the artist, and we shall persist for
Yes.
in order to make a somewhat better place in which we can live. We have we have a lovely a close from Joyce,
Yeah.
who has enjoyed hearing the birds outside your space.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I'm glad Joyce noticed that. I was hoping somebody would. I'm I'm trying to channel my Saint Francis over here. You know what I'm saying?
Not bad,
And
not bad.
we
Well,
have a lot of birds here.
excellent.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again, and to everyone else, please be in touch. Angeli there, she posted a link to our website if you'd like to contribute or be in touch with us, and would like to see you all back next week. We have Philip Burke with us in a very different kind of art and residency at Artpark. So we'll continue our conversation, and even thank you. This been a such an eye opener to so much of your work, and I'd love to see you back at Artpark sometime
Me
soon.
too.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank
All right.
thank you very much. It was a pleasure.